Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our third session with Cantor Evan Kent, direct from Jerusalem. A few announcements. I hope you will join us this Friday night, March 19th at 7:30 p.m., where Cantor Kent will join with Michelle and me singing, and with all of our rabbis. It's going to be a great service this Friday night at 7:30. And please sign up. If you are a member, there's a wonderful program that is for our members on this Sunday, March 21st at 11 a.m. That's so the cantor can do it while he's still awake. It's called Behind the Scenes, The Making of Shards, where Cantor Kent will sing and act out many of the scenes and talk about his one-man show and his journey making Aliyah and his family's migration to the States. Reminder that there will not be a Lunch and Learn next week nor the week after. We will resume on April 6th. So enjoy our class.
Hi, everybody. Wait, I'm letting some people in. It's so good to see you. And it's really... As we were talking about Passover last week, it is becoming Passover here. The aisles are filled with crates of matzah, and go know that for a friend who lives in Italy who is gluten-free, I found gluten-free matzah ball mix. Go know that even existed. But anyhow, yes, so Passover is coming, and what I want to do is sort of talk to you again about writing our own stories. We're going to put you in some breakout rooms so you can try some of these techniques. We're going to listen to a few of you with what some of the stories that you've prepared or working on, and then I want to share with you a story that I've recently written that is actually in my one-man virtual VOD, Video On Demand Passover show that I will give the information to Cantor Lori, and you, of course, will get a deep discount on this. Anyhow, so here, let's look for a minute at my PowerPoint for this week. Very similar from last week. So I do have to thank my friend, mentor, and teacher and guide, Karen Golden, for helping me with this PowerPoint and sort of these ideas. So we talked last week that the first thing we want to do, wait a second, I don't think I shared screen. I didn't share screen, did I? No, did not, because I'm only doing Zoom for a year. There we go, okay. Let's go back from the beginning. So as I said, I want to thank my friend, mentor, and teacher, Karen, who is an extraordinary storyteller, for sharing her wisdom and her insight into storytelling with me. And basically, when I tell a story, Karen is sitting on my shoulder saying, yeah, you got it. Anyhow, so the first thing we do when we tell a story is we want to open up that door. We call it opening the door. We want to take us to another place, take us to another time. We want to set the scene. We want to transport the listener to some place where they are not currently. So it was, for example, when I say, when I was 5, you imagine me with a very big head in a little tiny body. Or if I say, when I was in Paris, and you immediately see like the Champs-Élysées and the Eiffel Tower. That's how storytelling works. It's an instantaneous transformation. You know, when I was sitting on, when I was on my boat, and I put my boat someplace, you see the boat, you see the water. It is an amazing thing that happens. We talked a little bit about what we call thick description. So I just don't want to say let me invite Steve and Sue coming into the room. I don't want to say my grandmother was a short woman, because that just tells you like a little bit about her. But if I say, so what I have here, my grandmother was a short woman with long, dark brown curly hair that she always wore pinned up in two buns on either side of her head. Well, that actually was my Aunt Reba, not my grandmother. But you sort of have an instant picture of somebody. I love that summer in France when I was 9 years old. The bakery on the corner with the old man behind the counter had a little shiny gray mustache and would always say bonjour when I entered. When we use thick description, it allows the listener to sort of enter our world of the story momentarily. We talked about sense activity words. What do people look like? What did that bakery proprietor, what did the owner of that bakery in Paris look like? What sounds did I hear when I walked into the bakery? What smells were there? When I walked into this bakery when I was 5 years old and we rented an apartment in France, there was the bakery owner had this little tiny silver mustache that he always would play with as he would help serve us bread. But the most amazing smell, every morning I could walk in, I could smell freshly baked buttery croissants, and everybody knows that smell. What textures? As I held the loaf of bread under my arm, I could feel it, the bread warming itself, and the warmth of the bread as I would carry it back to our apartment. And the last one here, where I'm moving my screen, how did people feel in the story? What did people feel like? We want to know how you felt, but how did other people around you feel? And that's a very important thing, because we want to get sort of the full picture of what is happening in this storytelling. Unlike monologues, where monologues share the inner life of one person, and in a monologue, in a set, in a show, they are seated in a set, and they are in a time and a place, and possibly even in a costume. In a story, we don't have any of that artifice. We don't have a set. We don't have a costume. We often don't have lighting, and it's all between you and the storyteller and what information the storyteller gives you to conjure up this scene. So the most important thing, and we're going to work on this really soon, or like right now, we're going to go back. The magic moment. This is where I stopped telling you that my grandmother was a small woman from Russia. And instead of telling you that my grandmother was a small woman from Russia, I become a small woman from Russia. My voice might change a little bit. I might have a strange posture. And the thing that works really well with magic moments is a small prop. I might say something like, my first piano teacher, Gladys Schwartz, whenever she wanted to tell you something important, she would put on her glasses and say, now, Evan, I got to tell you something. And that becomes your catchphrase. That becomes something, that's what Gladys Schwartz does. My grandmother of blessed memory, my Russian grandmother, who had terrible command of English, she actually, till the day she died, preferred to speak and read and write in Yiddish. She would always, if she wanted to give you more, if she wanted to emphasize something she was telling you, she would say, believe you me. I don't know what that means. The syntax is so strange. She would say, believe you me, that woman's children are very nasty children. Believe you me. And she would, in the show that I do, I have an upstairs neighbor who is actually, she lives literally like upstairs from me. Right. Maddie entered the room, and her name is Hadassah. In my show, I call her Miriam, because God forbid she should ever see herself in my show. But she has this nasal voice from Baltimore, and she talks like this, and she always asks you very obvious questions, like, are you going running? Literally, this is a true story. She says to me, are you going running? And I'm like, I'm sweaty, wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and running shoes. It's like, yeah, where else do you think I've been? But she always goes, and that is when my magic moment, when I create Miriam, I always go, she's very, of course I'm exaggerating, but that gives you an opportunity to know who Miriam is, my upstairs neighbor. facial expressions, habits. My great grandmother always used to keep a tissue. I'm sure your grandmother did this too. Keep a tissue in her sleeve, and she'd always be like dabbing her nose. What the tissue was doing in there in that sleeve, she must have had like hundreds going up her arm. What was that? I couldn't hear you. Well, somebody said something. And so what are their habits? That is what a magic moment. It tells us, it takes us out of the moment where we say, where I'm telling you about my grandmother, I'm telling you about Miriam, I'm telling you about the baker in Paris, and instead we transform ourselves into that person. So again, we talked about trouble is coming. Wow, go back. Trouble is coming. This is the moment in the story where something is going to happen. For example, if you use the phrase, these are great examples here. Jim, my best friend Jim, he never got lost hiking. You know, what is somebody tell me, what is going to happen to Jim? He's going to get lost while hiking, right? I never lose my keys. What's going to happen?
You're going to lose them.
I'm going to lose them, exactly. And I want to tell you about my sister-in-law, Kathy. Kathy was driving, even though it was dark and windy and rainy, Kathy was really one of the best drivers I know. What is going to happen to Kathy?
Gonna have an accident.
Probably not good is going to happen to her. And that gives us a hint. For example, in my own show, there's I actually don't want to give it away, but it's not, you don't just sort of say, I knew that when I was making the chicken soup for Passover last year, when I was preparing the chicken soup, I knew something was missing, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. It'll come to me. And what was missing? You forgot to put in the chicken, you forgot to put in the matzo balls, whatever it is. It's something that is missing, something that should be there. It gives us, we call it trouble is coming. It makes the audience go, whoa. For example, we were watching yet another Netflix show last night. I think we've watched the entire catalog of Netflix shows. And in the show, I can't make up my mind if I'm going to watch another 2 episodes. I'll give them that much credit. In this show, the husband says to the wife, is everything okay? And she says, everything's okay. And the next thing you know, she's opening up her medicine chest and there is like a spice drawer filled. It's like more pills than I've ever seen in my life. And she takes one pill and she turns to, she says, now everything's okay. And it's like, okay, what is going on here? And you have no idea. I still have no idea what is happening in this sort of the psychological thriller, but it's adding up to something. And that's what trouble is coming is. Trouble. I decided to take the left turn. And once I got up the nerve to walk into that bar, often it is preceded by once. And once I lost my keys. It becomes a refrain. Trouble is over. And finally, and usually we say, and finally, I found my way out of Filene's basement. I mean, what had been happening in Filene's basement doesn't really matter. I'm just using an example. And finally, I realized that beets were really good for you. And then we want to close the door. We want to bring the whole story full circle. And that was what my summer in Paris. And now as an adult, when I take my children to Paris, I remember when I was 5 years old or something like that. Or every time I walk into the local bakery in Boca, that smell reminds me of what it was like when I was 5 years old in Paris. We don't know what the story is. It doesn't matter. This picture is backwards. This is on the wrong side of the door. Look at that.
Evan.
Anyhow, what I want to do is I want to break us up into. So actually, before we go on, let's stop sharing. Stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? There we go. Anybody have new and improved versions of their stories that they want to share with us tonight before we break into some rooms? today. It's tonight here. And it's also very confusing. We haven't moved our clocks ahead, so I have no idea what time it is. I'm very confused. Anybody want to share some of their stories?
I'll share.
Okay, sure, Lori.
So I was 5 years old, and we lived on the south side of Chicago, and it was Passover. And we were invited to my Aunt Esther and Uncle Jake's apartment for a Seder. And I remember my mother grumbling as she was getting me dressed in my little white tights and my navy velvet dress and my black shiny Mary Janes. And we went over to their apartment. And as soon as you opened the door, you could smell mothballs, always. And my Aunt Esther was the worst cook in the family. So I think that's what my mom was grumbling about as she was getting me ready. So we get to the door, and there's Aunt Esther, and she goes to give me a kiss. And Aunt Esther had these like silver whiskers that when she would kiss you, they would poke into your skin. And I just remember this, bubble on. She would kiss me and then would come Uncle Jake. Now, Uncle Jake never said anything, but he was tall and skinny and he had these long fingers and he would pinch our cheeks to the point where I was sure we were going to be like bruised. And so you just kind of braced yourself as you came in there. And I remember sitting at this very, very long table that was shaped like an L that wound through the living room and then turned into the dining room. And I got so tired, I laid on the couch that was covered with plastic, of course, because, you wouldn't want to ruin the white sofa. And I remember being half asleep when my grandfather says, well, here comes Esther's hockey pucks. And to me, that said, okay, soup was coming because that's what everybody joked about, Esther's matzo ball soup. So Esther comes out with this big pot of matzo ball soup. And she takes the ladle and it smelled okay. I remember I woke up and I came to the table, and as she took the ladle out of this pot, a dish rag was there. And everybody laughed and just laughed and laughed. And from that point, I remember just like laughing through the entire Seder. And for years and years afterwards, we always talked about Esther's hockey pucks, and remember when there was a dish rag in the soup. So that's my Passover Seder story.
That's sort of disgusting. One of the things that you could do is, how can you become 5-year-old Lori?
Yeah.
What does 5-year-old Lori talk like? It's like, oh, I'm so excited. It's like, what does 5-year-old Lori sound like? And sort of what is 5-year-old Lori really happy to be dressed up in a little sort of crinoline dress with Mary Janes? And when it's Aunt Esther and Uncle Jake, is that the two of them?
Yeah. So
one of the things that we do, especially in storytelling, is that when a taller, older person is coming towards us, so he said, and Uncle Jake would say, little Lori, how you doing? He looks down at you, and then you become the other person. You look up at him, and then Uncle Jake would always pinch my cheek, something like that. So we get the feeling that like you're talking to two people. But the description of Aunt Esther, right, Esther?
Yeah.
Of Aunt Esther is really nice. I mean, we want to sort of she has like whiskers.
She has these little sharp things. It was crazy.
Maybe she can. And Aunt Esther opens the door, and as she comes towards me, Lori, darling, I can see from her chin, I can see the whisk. Lori, darling, come here, give your bubble aunt a kiss. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you especially on Zoom,
You can lean in.
You can see I could see her whiskers. So it's a we can't do that in a real theater because it's a little creepy to get into people's face like that. But let me hear your voice and how excited you are or not excited when you're 5 years old. And I'm so excited. We're going to Aunt Esther's house and I get to wear a new dress. We get to wear Mary Jane's and watch me spin around. Ooh, it's Seder. I mean,
you do me so well.
I'm sure.
That was perfect. Oh man, getting put on the spot, right? So I was so excited because I got to put on my velvet dress and my white tights and my shiny Mary Janes, and it usually meant something great was happening, but my mother sounded very worried. And we got to the door, and there's my Aunt Esther. Lori, darling, I'm so happy to see you. And I got a little nervous because I was thinking, oi, she's got those whiskers. Those whiskers are going to get me. Those little sharp things. She must trim them or something. I don't know how they get like that, but they're coming at me. Lori, let me have a hug and a kiss. So she hugged and kissed me. And then came Uncle Jake, and Uncle Jake said nothing. But the fingers, they were coming. I know those long bony fingers, they were coming, and he was gonna pinch my cheeks. Okay, we got past that part.
That's sweet.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, you actually might say to the audience, I mean, if, children is like, do you like my shoes? Aren't my shoes shiny? Look at my socks. I'm wearing new socks. I'm going to see my Aunt Esther. I love my Aunt Esther, except I can't stand her face. I mean, so... Yeah, it's a very sweet story. I mean, that's a really good Passover story, that a rag, a dish towel comes out of the soup. Maybe that's what they use for flavor. I don't know. So, anybody else want to share a story? Don't be shy. There are no shy people in this class. Everybody's averting their eyes. It's very hard to avert your eyes in a Zoom room.
All right, I'll share.
Sure.
Okay. Lori, that was great. All right, so I'm going to go back to my infant voice. Oh, I'm so excited. Today, we're going to take a ride up to Philadelphia because it's Thanksgiving, and we always sang in the car for our ride. To Bobby's house we go, to Bobby's house we go. Hi, how dare you? To Bobby's house we go. And then we would get there. And as soon as we walked into the house, it smelled so good. I knew it was Thanksgiving because the turkey was delicious odors all over. That's all I'm going to do.
So it's a really good, something, Thanksgiving is for Americans, it's such a universal thing. I mean, first of all, is To Bubby's House We Go a song that you actually sang?
Oh yeah, we repeated the same verse over and over and over. And my father would drive the car and he would start us, and my sister and I are in the back seat, and we would sing, and then play game with the license plates on cars.
Oh, license plate bingo.
Or what state is that car from, and that car, and what kind of car was it?
How long was your drive?
An hour to Philadelphia, Atlantic City to Philadelphia. And we enjoyed it because my father loved music, and that was his form of communication with us. That was about it, in addition to daily business stuff. And we always had fun going to Bubby's. And the same thing happened with Passover, too. We never went to my father's side. Never. I don't know why. A lot of chazarai going on there. But always to Bubby's for Passover, and always to Bubby's for Thanksgiving. And all the cousins and everybody was there.
So one of the things to say is to be in the car, your magic moment, open the door is like in the car. I mean, it's such a great, and you're sitting, and did you sit in the back seat or the front seat?
Always the back seat. My sister and I, my mother in the front seat, father driving. Nobody else knew how to drive.
And
We were
did
little.
did you and your sister ever fight in the back seat?
Not really, if she was starting to get on my nerves, I would always stop and go, Mommy! And then she would stop because I thought, I'm going to tell Mommy on you. And then stop.
Very cool. You actually, one of the things you might do is that when we were sitting in the back seat, I'm so excited because we're going to Bubby's house for Thanksgiving. To Bubby's house we go. To Bubby's house
we go.
I'm
Great.
so excited. To Bubby's house we go. Can you all sing with me? To Bubby's house we go.
We go. To Bubby's house.
That's so good. Can we do it again? Mom, can we do it again? Were there verse? Did you change the verse as you went?
No.
Thank God the drive was only an hour.
That reminds me of something. It has nothing to do with anything we're talking about.
Margaret, tell us.
I'm not getting, I'm not a big storyteller. I just quick tell you what happened. I used to sing a lot. I have a horrible voice. But when the children were small, I can see my son in those days. The car seat was right next to me in the front seat. It didn't, we're going to the grocery store, we're going to grandma's house, we're going to this, we're doing that. It's always something singing. I sing everything. And one day, this was Ethan. And he must have been about three and a half. And he said, Mama, please stop singing. And it was hard. It was terrible. For me, I was in such a habit of singing everything that we did that it took me a while to get off of it. But he couldn't take it anymore.
Do you still sing?
It was constant. We're going here to that same tune, going to grandma.
Margaret, do you still sing?
Yes, I do, but only by myself.
Why?
To myself. I don't want to offend anyone.
You want to offend? Okay. Yeah, so there's lots of singing. Yeah. Fran, the other thing you might add is that somehow you say that it was such an adventure. In those days when you're 5 years old, going from Atlantic City to Philadelphia, it felt like you were going literally like to the other end of the world.
Absolutely, because we never traveled, everybody's always working. And as a little kid, I thought that was like, wow, like people go to Israel from here to Israel. Wow, that's how I felt.
Yeah, so somehow that can come out in the story. Like, we're so excited. My sister and I, we're all dressed up. We have snacks. An hour drive is sometimes what my drive in Los Angeles, the 7-mile drive from the synagogue to my house was. Sort of like we're packing a lunch. We're getting our visas stamped, and we're singing to Bubby's house we go. To Bubby's house we go. I'm so excited. To Bubby's house we go. And we have snacks. We have snacks for Bubbies. We have snacks for Bubbies. It doesn't have to be exactly the same thing, but you want to build up the sense. And my sister and Jan and I were holding hands and we're singing and my father's turning on the radio. And what year is this?
Oh, maybe 1955 through 60.
So a little bit of internet research lets you put on sort of what was the top 10 song in 1955 on the radio.
Very interesting.
My father turns on the radio and we all start singing and dancing, whatever, the twist or something. And what happens is that we go immediately into your space. I'm going to tell you a story next Sunday when Lori interviews me. I'm telling a story about my great-grandmother and how she used to babysit for me. And we used to watch Lawrence Welk. And I told this story in Europe, and they looked at me like I actually had it before I presented. I had to give them like a glossary of like who these people were. So Lawrence Welk, and we used to, and the Lennon sisters, and immediately as soon as I say that, everybody of a certain age and a certain generation knows exactly what I'm talking about. So if you say
every Saturday night.
Right, every Saturday night. Exactly. And
every Saturday night, I would sleep over my grandparents' house. And what was on TV? Lawrence Welk.
Lawrence Welk. Wonderful, wonderful. And
Mitch Miller.
Mitch Miller.
Remember?
Yes, I do. That's how we used to conduct. and Lori's looking at us like, what? You're all crazy. And Lori,
No, I had Sing Along with Mitch album. I'm right there.
That's it.
this is your, by the way, this is your bonus question. Does anybody know what instrument Mitch Miller played?
No.
He played the accordion?
Lawrence
No.
Welk played the accordion.
Oh, that's right. What did
Mitch
play?
Miller was a
Concert?
symphonic oboe player.
Oh.
Go figure.
Wow. Yeah.
So Fran, I mean, I think this is a story really worth developing. Sort of like what happens when you get to Bubby's house, and sort of then, it's a great story. Thanksgiving is like the most universal American holiday. Somehow we're going to Bubby's house. And now, I mean, I'm not going to write the story for you, but if it's a great beginning, and you listen to whatever song is on the radio, and Bubby makes, what was her signature dish for Thanksgiving?
Goodness. Well, of course, turkey, and there was always stuffing, and we would always have matzo ball soup and simmis, the prunes stewed.
Thanksgiving?
And yeah.
Because the Pilgrims ate simmis, so yeah.
Yeah. And desserts, always fruit, because my father was a fruit and vegetable man, produce, and he would always bring the crate of fresh fruit.
That's
And
very cool.
The crate, yeah, it was great. And it was always a great festive time because I knew my cousins, my mother had 2 other siblings, and all the cousins got together. That was in the fall. That was the only time we all got together for that season and Thanksgiving.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, so I mean, there's something, and now, when you come around, and now as when I make my grandmother's tzimmis, it reminds me of, and as I'm mixing the carrots and the raisins, I sing to you have grandchildren?
No, Cantor.
No. So
I had 2 girls. I 2 girls.
I sing to my own daughters, to Bubby's house we go. And that's how we open the door and close the door. That's how you come full circle. So let's take a few minutes. What I want to do is we want to create a magic moment when you open the door for Passover, when the door is open for Passover, when you're visiting somebody, who is there to welcome you? And we pull up in the car, we run up the steps, we open the door, and there's Grandma Ida, and she says, "Oh my God, I'm so glad to see you all," with her cigarette in one hand and the bourbon in the other. So it's like, that's Grandma Ida. Let's break up. Russ, we're going to break it into, we have 1, 2, 3. We can break up into like 3 rooms, and let's take a few minutes to find that magic moment person, and then we're going to come back and everybody's going to share it.
How long?
6 minutes.
6 minutes. All right.
All right.
Have fun, everyone.
We are back, but I don't see everybody. Hello. Hello, everybody. We're back. Who wants to share? Let's see. Lori, which room did you get a chance to? Who wants to share somebody who meets them at the front door? Let's. I'll pick Philip. Philip, who met you at the front door? What are they? Who are they? What do they sound like? Philip, you're muted. Oh, there you are.
Baghdad. I was having trouble thinking of a Passover story, but I did come up. I can manufacture the story a little bit. When I lived in New York, I knew this little short woman named Esther Belsey, up like that. And she used to cut her cigarettes in half because she was like really cheap and she didn't want to tip when we would go out and there was all kind of things. But she'd come to the door and she's carrying a bottle of whiskey to my Seder. I said, Esther, that has hummus. Hummus, schmummus. Or about hummus. I want my scotch. So I pour her some scotch and she's coming into the Seder and I had some canned peaches in jars on the thing. And she was a little tipsy, so she leans that way, and all the glass peach jars broke all over the floor. And Esther goes, "Oh, sorry about that. I guess I ruined the night." And I said,
She's a great character. Somebody who comes to your Seder carrying a bottle of booze and a half cigarette. That's an amazing person to meet. I want to meet her. Anybody else? Somebody else have somebody who opens the door for you? Yeah, Alan.
So I'm young and I go and we drive an hour on a terribly long time, all the way from the south side of Chicago to the north side of Chicago. And instead of greeted by my wonderful grandmother, who was short and old and only spoke Yiddish and would always say, "Oh, Shana Punham, oh, Shana Punham," I was met by my Uncle Abe, who was big and strong. And he always grabbed me by my ears. And he said, Rabbit Puss, I'm so glad to see you. And I would run away as fast as I could because I wanted to get to the kitchen and see my grandmother.
What did he called you? Rabbit Puss?
Rabbit Puss, because my ears were sticking.
Great. Nice, and the Rabbit Puss. All right. Who else has an opening for us? An opening and a magic moment. Phyllis, how about you? Just because you're on my screen over here. Phyllis, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I didn't get a chance to go because I'm chicken. Well, every year at Passover in the Bronx, it was very hilly, but we all lived in the same neighborhood as my grandparents. And we would walk past the haunted house and up a very high hill and past the railroad tracks, all walking to get to Grandma's house for Passover Seder. Well, we would walk up 5 flights of steps wearing our new patent leather shoes, our new dresses, some costume jewelry, and ring the bell. Well, the door would open and all our cousins would come running and hug and kiss. And it was the beginning of a fabulous day.
So who opens the door for you? Is there one specific person?
Grandma.
And what does Grandma look like? What is she here? What is she wearing?
She's wearing her house dress. And sweating like a pig because she's cooking over a pot of soup made for 20 people. And she still stops and kisses her, and her sweat gets all over us, but it feels good anyway, because we know she loves us.
So that's a beautiful image of sort of your grandmother. And would she then change her clothing for Seder?
Of course.
Of course. So, of course, what a silly question. So, I mean, grandma started opening the door with, like, wearing her house dress, with an apron, wearing her scuffed slippers, right? Holding a ladle, right? She has to have that ladle in her hand. And then she's like, Phyllis, it's so good to see you. And as she's swinging the ladle around and there's soup still coming out of the ladle, you create that moment. But when you say when we opened the door, my grandmother was standing there wearing her house dress, with her fluffy slippers and holding a ladle, we know exactly who that woman is.
Thank
so
you.
It's a beautiful, beautiful opening. Those grandmothers really don't exist anymore. We're looking at the end of sort of the era of Booby. So what I want to share with you is a story. It's a little longer than the time we have, so I hope you will stay with me. If you have to leave, I totally understand. But it's a story about a series of Passover Seders. Oh, it's so warm in here, and it's crowded, and I can't move, and I'm 6 years old, and I'm at grandma's house, and there's so many people here, and there's chairs all over the place, and there's my grandmother and my grandfather, and there's Aunt Edith. Aunt Edith wears too much lipstick. She always has lipstick on her teeth. She wears too much perfume. And I'm sitting next to my Uncle Maya, and he always looks at me and he says, "Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Do you know Maya? Do you know Maya?" And I think it's so strange that he's asking a 6-year-old, "Do you know who you are? Do you know who I am?" Of course, he's my Uncle Maya. "Do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Do you know who I am?" He says, hitting me on the chest and pinching my cheeks. And there's so many dishes. There's a dish for parsley, and there's a dish for saltwater, and there's a dish for charosis, and there's so much food here, and I have to recite the 4 questions, and I don't know if I know it. I think I might know it. I learned it in Hebrew school, but I'm not sure if I know it. And there's all these dishes and all this food, and there's brown meat with brown gravy, and there's brown chicken with brown gravy, and there's gefilte fish. There's gefilte fish in the middle of the table, and it's sitting like brown blobs of fish sitting in the middle of some brown liquid with carrots on top. And then there's over here, there's a dish for hard-boiled eggs, and there's some egg on top of it. And it comes time for me to sing the 4 questions, and I say, "Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylot shelichol halaylot anoachlin chametzu matzah halayla hazeh kulanu matzah." And Aunt Edith comes up to me, she says, "Oh, what a sheina ponam, what a sheina boman, a voice like an angel, a voice like an angel." And then it comes time for us to sing Eliyahu Hanavi, and we sing Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi. And since I'm the youngest, they asked me to open the door. And here, in the middle of Brooklyn on New Jersey Avenue, when I'm 6 years old, there's no Elijah. Elijah isn't coming tonight. I'm 13 years old. I'm in Jerusalem. I just became bar mitzvah 3 days before the beginning of Passover. And we're sitting at friends of ours, and I don't know what's going on. There's food on the table. The charoset doesn't look like charoset, and there's all kinds of things. I don't know what this food is. And at one point in the service, we sing, "Dai Dayenu, Dai Dayenu," and we all hit ourselves with green onions, and I don't know what these people are doing, and it's so crowded, and I can barely move, and then I'm still the youngest. I'm 13 years old, and I'm still the youngest. And they say, "You sing the 4 questions," and I sing, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. And the woman sitting next to me, I think she's somebody's aunt. She says, Lo, ze lo nachon. That's not right. That's not the right melody. Ze melody and yishana. It's an old melody. We sing a new melody now. We sing a new melody. And she sings, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. And everybody joins in. Mikol halelot. And I join in. Shebechol halelot. Anu ochlin chametz umatzah. Chametz umatzah. And it comes a time for us to sing Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishbi. And they say, you open the door. You open the door. Efshar liftoch et hadelet. And I go to the door, and even here in Jerusalem, just a few days after my bar mitzvah, there's no Eliyahu. Elijah isn't coming tonight. I'm 24 years old. I'm in my second year of cantorial school, and I've been asked to lead the Seder at the hospital for joint diseases in New York City. Now, a secret, up until now, I thought that the hospital for joint diseases was a hospital for people that had two diseases at the same time. But no, it's a hospital for people who actually have diseases of the joints, the bones, the muscles, the ligaments. And the social worker in charge of the Seder says, these people are in a lot of pain. Please make the Seder short and brief. And we're in this giant atrium, and people are coming in. There are people being wheeled in by orderlies in wheelchairs, and there's one woman comes in on crutches. Another guy is actually pushed in on like a gurney. And one woman comes in leaning on her intravenous pole, wearing just her hospital gown and some slippers. And she comes shuffling in until she finally sits down. And once again, I'm the youngest. I'm actually the youngest at this hospital for joint diseases in New York. So I sing, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. Why is this night different? Why is this night different from all other nights as we celebrate Seder here in a hospital? And we come to the part of the Seder where we sing Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishbi. And I walk to the back door of this cafeteria atrium, and the woman on the intravenous pole, she stands up, she says, Cantor Kent, I want to open the door. I want to open the door for Eliyahu. And she stands up and she's leaning on the pole, and then she's leaning on me, and then her hospital gown is flapping open and shut, open and shut. So I tie the gown shut, and she walks with me slowly to the back door. We open the back door. And even here, in the middle of Manhattan, at the hospital for joint diseases, there's no Eliyahu. Elijah, is not coming tonight. And last year, here in Jerusalem, in the middle of a pandemic, we're sitting at our table. Instead of having Seders filled with friends and family and even strangers and relatives, the government of Israel prohibits us from having large groups. So it's just me and my husband, Don, the only two sitting at the table. But there was a social service agency that said, we don't want you to be alone. Even though we're alone, we can be together. And they encourage everybody at 7:30 to go out onto your balcony. Most apartments in Israel have a balcony, and to sing the 4 questions. So I'm actually still the youngest in my house. So we go out onto the balcony at 7:30, and I go, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. And I'm the only one. In this neighborhood full of people having Seders, I'm the only one on my balcony. So I try it again, a little louder. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. And still, nothing. I'm the only person singing. Shebechol halelot anu ochlin chametz umatzah. And then from across the way, a little girl's voice answers, chametz umatzah. And then on either side of me, my neighbor says, halayla hazeh, halayla hazeh. And the other neighbor says, Mikol shekol matzah. And then from other buildings we hear halayla hazeh, halayla hazeh, kulano matzah. We go back into the apartment and we finish up our Seder, and it comes the time to sing Eliyahu Hanavi, and we sing Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi. And I go to the front door and I look. And even here in Jerusalem, in the middle of a pandemic, there's no Eliyahu. Eliyahu is not coming tonight. So we finish the Seder. I begin to clean up the dishes. And even though there were just two of us, there's wine stains, there's matzah crumbs all over the table. And as I'm standing in the kitchen and I look at our dining room table that was just set for two, but should have been set for 10 or 15 people, I can't help but thinking of that Seder when I was 6 years old at Grandpa Ben's and Grandma Alice's house. I think of that Seder when I was bar mitzvah in Jerusalem. I think of that Seder when I was at the hospital for joint diseases. And I look at our table now and I think of all those Seders we had in Los Angeles and so many people that were gathered around our table. And I go back out onto the Mirpeset, and people are singing Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi. And it reminds me that Uncle Meyer used to say to me, do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? Do you know who I am? The rabbis tell us that when Eliyahu the prophet, when Elijah the prophet comes, he will not come dressed in the robes of a monarch or a prophet. He will come disguised as an old woman or a beggar, or maybe somebody sitting next to you on the bus. And as I'm standing there, I hear other people singing Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi. And even though we are separate, we are together, because on this Passover night, this Passover here in Jerusalem, in the middle of a pandemic, I remember what Uncle Meyer has said. Do you know who you are? Do you know who I am? Because on this night, at this giant Seder table, all of us separate but together, we have all become Eliyahu. I have become Eliyahu, and you have become Elijah the prophet. Chag Sameach.
That was so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Great story. Great.
Thank you.
That was terrific.
Thanks. Actually, in the video on demand version of that, there's a very clever, I must say so myself, there's an Eliyahu rap. So I become a rap artist. There's I do a rap to Eliyahu Hanavi, but I'll try to send you a clip of that. So thank you so much. You all have, every one of you has the gem of a beautiful, beautiful story. I work from a very specific method. I tell it, then I write it, and then I retell it. So basically, that's how I write. Some people do not. My teacher, Karen, she only works from an oral method. She tells it. Sometimes she actually tapes herself. Everybody works differently. But you all have the gems of beautiful stories there. And they're important to tell, because if you don't tell the stories, the next generation will not know these stories. They will not know the boobies and zaydis that opened the door for us for Passover. And that's a very important part of our heritage. When I was teaching in Los Angeles, before I made Aliyah, I said, innocently, I said, do any of you have grandparents who are immigrants? And one kid said, yeah, my grandparents immigrated from New York to Beverly Hills. I was saying, that probably was not. I said, yes, that's a good example. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. But we don't have, most of us do not have immigrant grandparents. And that is a part of our legacy, a part of our history that we want to preserve. So tell your stories, and I'll be here for a couple of minutes. And it's been really a joy sharing stories and hearing stories and helping develop stories with you. So, and in advance, Chag Sameach, and I'll see you for Friday night services. I'm so excited. We're all
That's
zooming
right.
in.
Thank you, Cantor. Just a reminder to everybody, there is no class this week or next week for Lunch and Learn. And services are 7:30 this Friday. If you're a member, please register for Cantor Kent's program on Sunday, Behind the Scenes, The Making of Shards at 11 a.m. You'll get a special code to log into the program where he's going to sing and tell the stories and how he created the one-man show, Shards.
And I will not be telling this story, so you are the only ones who. Yeah, actually, you're the only people that actually heard this story live, because it's on the other one. It's on video. So thank you for being a great audience.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Any questions? I'm here for a couple of minutes.
Yes, can I ask you something?